Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Over the last few days, there's been a bunch of data mines that have come out by Yoshida talking about the Jaguar IS. Obviously, with the event coming up, it's time for the IS to kind of get added to the game so we can have a look at it, but there was a few weird pieces of information as well, especially when it came to the new texts. When you have a look at the new texts, what it actually says is, first of all, the Adore Mark 811, which is probably for the Jaguar IS, or at least for a Jaguar in the future, since it is an engine that the Indians built for their Jaguars. But then there's another one, the F404-GE-100. Now, of course, this got a lot of people looking around, thinking about what possibilities this could bring along, because the F404, if you don't know, is a family of engines developed by General Electric for a lot of different vehicles. When you have a look at the evolutions of the F404, they were used on a metric ton of vehicles, including some big hitters, such as the Hornets, which, of course, are the FA-18s we've talked about before. The Intruder also got a variant of it, and, of course, the Nighthawk. So a lot of American machines used different variants of the F404, and also the 412, which was kind of the development of it. But there is one machine in particular which could easily come into the game, which I'm pretty sure this is tied to. Since this is the GE100 engine, it's probably best to talk about that one specifically. The GE100 was kind of a growth step, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read part of this PDF. I'll leave a link in the description to it. It's a pretty cool one, and overall gives quite a lot of information. But basically, General Electric has established a long-range growth program for the F404. Augmented engines are under development to meet customer needs from 16,000 to 22,000 pounds thrust, and non-augmented engines will be available from 10,500 to 14,000 pounds of thrust. Besides meeting the requirements for higher performance versions of existing F404 aircraft, these growth engines will meet the needs of aircraft planned for production through the 1990s. Each step of the F404 growth program has defined milestones incorporating proven advanced technology carefully balanced to achieve increased performance while maintaining the engine's outstanding reliability, maintainability, and durability. The first growth step, the -100 engine for the F20, integrated a digital electronic control system and single-engine dependability features with a higher turbine inlet temperature during augmenter use to raise maximum thrust. In addition, the control system was tuned to improve engine performance at envelope points as specified by the customer to better match the aircraft mission requirements. Finally, component improvements were incorporated in the form of a more reliable gear fuel pump and an improved turbine blade material. Now, the interesting thing is the second growth engine, so the one after the -100, was the F404-RM12, and this one was designed for the Gripen, of all things, to kind of show what stage of development a lot of these things are in. So, the -100 was literally designed for the F20, the Tiger Shark, as it is known. It was also used, or at least a few variants of it were used in other areas, so like for the A4S, which is kind of like a Singaporean Super Skyhawk, which is a quite fun thing, so maybe we'll get that instead, but I think it's pretty obvious the F20 would be the closer one. The F20 is a perfect vehicle for a premium, or it's a perfect vehicle for an event vehicle. If you don't know what the Northrop F20 Tiger Shark is, imagine you take an F5E and you decide to give it steroids. That's pretty much what it is. The idea was to take the pre-existing design of the F5E and then increase its engine power, increase its overall capabilities to give it, instead of just a dogfighting role, also giving it the ability to use beyond visual range air-to-air stuff, some missiles, and all of those wonderful things. The interesting thing about the F-20, though, is even though it was a really good vehicle, it had one of those problems, which some vehicles have, where it just either wasn't good enough, or there was stuff which was already being produced at the same time. Around the 80s, of course, you had the F-16s, and the idea of the F-20 was it was probably going to be an export vehicle, since the F-16 was already won, or the program for the F-16 already won the domestic kind of contract to be able to fund or make planes for the United States Air Force. The F-20 would be then shafted to the export market. But the problem with this is because of a bunch of changes when it came to policy, the F-16 was also allowed to be exported, so the F-20 was kind of left in the dirt, competing with a vehicle that it may have been better than in certain areas, but the problem with it was the fact that it wasn't in production, they only had a few prototypes, and therefore kind of just fell apart. The DoD just lost interest in it compared to other options. So this vehicle is powered by the F404G100 engine, so that's why it makes it at least feel like this vehicle could easily come into the game at pretty much any point. And since this new text has come in, it makes sense that you marry the two ideas together. The vehicle itself can go Mach 2, of course, it's a pretty quick one, especially from the 80s, and of course it can bring a bunch of AIM-9s and a ton of different weapons, as you can imagine. It does have two 20mm M39A2s, so they kept that from the F5. It has a bunch of rounds in it, which is also nice, and also 7 hardpoints where you can carry a metric ton of different stuff, not just AIM-9s, not just AIM-7s, but also stuff like AMRAAMs and Mavericks and Harpoons and all of the other stuff that America has made over the years, which are designed to annihilate things, right? It can also carry a bunch of bombs in the form of Mark 80s. It can also obviously have cluster bombs and stuff like that. This thing is designed to be able to bring everything. One of the problems with the F5 was it was very limited in its roles, especially the early variants, which is why they tried to expand them over time. And the F20, even though it's a light fighter, its ordnance options do not give you that impression. It can be a light fighter because you only have to bring a small amount of ordnance, therefore keeping your maneuverability and using that single engine, the 100, to great effect. But at the same time, if you needed to equip it with a bunch of other stuff, you could do that as well. That was the idea of creating this versatile multi-role thing. And as you've seen with the F-16 and as you've seen with a bunch of these different vehicles, that was something that was heavily prioritized by the US kind of at the time. Now, unfortunately, as we said, the F-20 never really went anywhere, and only 3 of them were built, and in a parallel universe, this thing has a much, much greater role to play in the history of American aviation. But the limited role that it did play was still beneficial, since a lot of the technologies that were used on it were used in further, vehicles for the United States Air Force and also beyond. Hopefully, we'll see the F-20. It makes sense that we're going to see the F-20. There's no reason why the F-20 wouldn't come around. The only question, as always, with something like the F-20 is when does it come, not if. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Schnitzel Stroker, Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, B. Young, Opium Prime, Masonocrat, Lafouche, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.